Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figure It Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Figure It Out cast for January 2024. I am once again joined by the evil Rob Thanos. Welcome back, Rob.
I, for one, Adam, are really excited to be here at the MicroStrategy USA podcast, your number one source for wealth investment opportunities. We're going to talk a lot of crypto, we're going to talk NFTs, and we're going to find out how you could maximize your revenue streams. How you doing, Adam?
Yeah, that's great. He's obviously making a reference to the very lively events of January 11th on this channel, which maybe we'll talk briefly about. Before we do that, though, I do want to remind you guys this is a Patreon-backed podcast, so if anybody is out there who wants to support this podcast or support me, support the channel, etc., please feel free to do so with the links in the description. You can also do things like follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Spreadshirt, all that sort of stuff, my travel channel. And if you could do us a favor, drop a like on the video, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't done that before. So if you are a Patreon backer, one of the perks you can have is, of course, being on the podcast. And guess what? We have somebody who is. Abdullah, welcome back.
Hello, hi. Happy to be back.
Yeah,
With
thanks
low
as always
energy.
for joining us.
No worries.
No, you're good, man. Well, then get some coffee and we'll get going here. So let's briefly talk about what Rob just alluded to. I haven't, at the time of recording, I haven't done a video on this yet, although by the time this is public, I probably will have done one. So all I'm going to say on this really is that apologies for the events of January 11th on this channel, where suddenly it was taken over by hackers. This is becoming a more reoccurring problem on YouTube. And all I'm going to really say about it is that the sequence of events was I was just kind of sitting here watching a movie. I wasn't really doing anything. And then all of a sudden my phone lit up and said I was disconnected from Google. And I was like, what? And then I tried to log in and it wouldn't let me. And then all of a sudden I was getting notifications from two-factor authentication being like, you know, here's your security code. And I'm like, I didn't approve this at all. And then I was completely kicked out of my browser and nothing would work. And all of a sudden, like, they had locked everything. So I reached out to Team YouTube on Twitter, who didn't do much initially, but then eventually after like the entire internet was coming at them, they did. And they also, I got a hold of a guy who actually works at Google and he kind of kicked it up the chain. And so fortunately, it was resolved by that evening. Mostly there were some bugs left that I had to clean up. The hackers had renamed the channel, as Rob had just alluded to, which was, by the way, the last thing that was able to be fixed. When those names get changed, it really screws stuff up. But yeah, anyway, we're up and running here. So, you know, welcome back. And I guess in a weird way, it's a reminder that even though I give away the content for free, digital media is not ownership. And so if you like those videos, remember they apparently can be taken away from you at any time. So.
And reply with your address in the comments so we can send you physical copies of all videos.
Yeah.
You know, your DVDs and Blu-rays.
No. The Adam Koralik box set on Laserdisc, the entire set. Composed of 490,000 discs.
Oh, hey, man, just do it on VCD so you can play it on the Saturn.
Oh, that makes sense. That's a good idea. All right, but so let's move on and talk about stuff that's actually at here. So we're going to do our format a little differently this month. Basically, there was a bunch of little stories that kind of came out that I thought were interesting and that would make kind of a good, like, rapid fire series of discussions. And sounds like something you guys were on board with. And Abdullah, as someone who gets to pick a subject, you didn't have one, but you wanted to talk about Nintendo stuff specifically. And there are actually 3 Nintendo subjects within this. So keep in mind that all these subjects we're going to kind of give quick thoughts on and, you know, maybe a few minutes each. And then that's kind of the format. You guys ready to go?
Yeah.
You're good? All right. So the first on that list was the Nintendo Switch flashcard, the MIG. Now, I actually did a separate video on this, but I obviously didn't get the input from the two of you. So, Rob, would you like to start off?
I think it's in a nutshell, it's an interesting first draft of what a Switch, flashcard or multi-cart could look like. Something in the vein of an EverDrive or being able to run stuff off a SD card. It's definitely not perfect, and a lot of the way to maximize what you're going to be able to get out of it requires you to have a modded Switch anyway. So what's the point in in a lot of aspects? I don't know. I think it's interesting. Who knows in 5 years, in 10 years, what a Switch multi-cart could look like. Hopefully something a little bit better than this. That's what I would say.
Abdullah, how about you?
Well, I'm not too enthusiastic about it. I know that when I was a kid, we used to use similar things on the DS, for example, flashcards, but overall not too interested in it, since I think you have to mod the Switch anyway, and I don't want to dive into that, because, you know, you don't want to risk. That's my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, because, like, isn't it, like, each individual copy of a game has a certain, like, key code that needs to be kind of authenticated through the Switch? And
Yes.
so it's like...
Every game has a certificate, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just, like, every game, it's every copy of every game. So it's
That
like...
is correct, yes.
So you need to basically have your own copy of the game and be able to rip that and be able to kind of extract that code and kind of add it. Otherwise, the game won't be authenticated. So, I don't know, unless you're playing, like all of your entire Switch collection, if you got, like, a massive physical collection that somehow you were able to digitize, and then you could, like, add them all onto, like, a single game cartridge, it's like, kind of, what's the point of this? You know, there's no menu like an EverDrive that can drop down. It's going to be kind of a convoluted method, so, good first draft. Keep working on it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've seen a couple of videos because there's been a couple updates since. Because when I first did it, the review units hadn't shipped, although I don't know anybody yet who has one. But there's been some updates regarding like where this might have come from. So are you guys familiar with the story of, I think his name was Gary Bowser. He was part of Team Executor, the guys who did like Xbox hacking.
Yeah.
And I think Nintendo eventually came after him, and he was in prison for a while. He got out, and I'm not saying this is related, but it sure looks like it. He gets out of prison, and then very shortly after that, this goes live, and somebody had actually done a little bit of research and found that one of the domains or something like that that's connected to this website is actually one of his. So it's possible that this is something he's doing, and that this is almost like a screw you to Nintendo for putting him in jail in the first place, which I found just kind of like hilarious, if there's any truth to that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit of speculation, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's purely speculative, but like I said, there are people who did some videos that show better evidence than just my recollection, but it was kind of, well, you know, okay. I don't blame him if he's just pissed at Nintendo. But I want to say something else that's on a more personal level. It's kind of interesting. So there is a MiG Switch fan page on Facebook. And this is a little weird to me because they have posted nothing other than their artwork. And if you go to their followers and following, the only thing they're following is my fan page.
Oh.
And
so
I'm like, what is
you're
that?
returning to the scene of the crime, I see.
I guess. That or like the MiG Switch guys are the ones who did the damn hack, but I don't know why they would have.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Any other thoughts on this at all?
No, I think, yeah.
All right, then we will move on to the next one. Nintendo Switch 2 rumors. All right, obviously, again, I did a video on this, although there's been an update. Did you hear about that whole Game Shark thing?
Yeah. Game Shark came back from the dead in order to leak the Switch 2.
Yeah, that was one of the most absurd. All right, Rob, why don't you just take point? Go for it.
I don't know too much about this. All I know is that, like, I guess, you know, I don't know where this was even leaked. It's like Game Shark, like, accidentally leaked, like, press release, like, but it's like an AI thing. I don't know. The whole thing is a fucking shit show. But it's just more garbage Switch 2 rumors. It's like, oh, it's coming out next year or this year in the fall. So I don't fucking know.
I don't usually put a whole lot of stock in rumors, as you guys know, but like I do find this one just kind of fascinating because it's just it's obviously the rumor that will not die. But if you want to reiterate what actually supposedly is happening or might happen, whatever, is that the upgraded version of the Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch 2 isn't actually an upgraded version. It's supposedly kind of just like another a familial relationship, so going from say the DS to the 3DS, as opposed to say going from like the Game Boy Advance to the Nintendo DS, where it was like a completely different thing, effectively a whole new line of stuff. That's kind of how, if you believe the rumors, that's supposedly what that's like. And that Game Shark of all groups, which was a name I hadn't heard in a long time because that was the 90s. The last version of Game Shark that came out, I want to say, was like 2002 or 2003, where something technically called Game Shark came out for the original Xbox, but it was just like a save exploit feature thing. Anyway, so yeah, I just kind of like I don't put a whole lot of stock in these rumors, but that's pretty much what it boils down to, is just the idea that supposedly this thing's coming this year, and I'm very much of the mindset that just wait till like the actual company says something, not like some guy who claims to be an insider who totally has a friend at Nintendo that told him all this. It's just I just don't get why you buy this kind of thing.
But also it's like the date that it kind of like leaked, quote unquote, that the Switch 2 would come out would be like September of this year. And it's like, honestly, I think most people expect that the Switch 2 will at least be announced this year. So it's like you can kind of blindfold yourself and throw a dart at a board and kind of like get somewhat close to a suspected Switch 2 launch. Although I don't think it's going to be called the Switch 2. It's obviously they're just going to add an extra I to the word Switch, and it's going to be called the Switch, and it's going to be all motion controls.
God, that would suck. But that is almost believable. I still think Super Nintendo Switch would have been great, but whatever.
I honestly think that would be a quite a good name, actually. I don't know.
I agree. I'm of mixed emotions on this, because part of me, not that I want to believe this is a thing, but part of me goes like, it would be cool to actually carry on the Switch name and all that sort of thing. But then I'm like, I typically don't like that. Like, I don't really like that. I've said this for years. I don't really like how Microsoft and Sony they aren't video game companies. They have a product, and they just repeat the product's name over and over again. One of the interesting things about like Sega is they literally never did that in any of their consoles. They just kind of, here's an entirely new name. Nintendo is a weird one, because their first system, they basically just, other than the Japanese version, the Famicom, they pretty much just named the system after the company, which is probably where we all got that bad habit of calling it a Sega or a Nintendo. And then I always thought Super Nintendo was kind of a lame, because again, it's the same thing, it's just your company's name. I wouldn't argue that until the GameCube, they actually had like a real name for their systems. Yeah. Other than the Game Boy, obviously. So I guess what I'm asking you is, do you think Nintendo would go with an original name, or would they just do what they did with the Wii U, where they're like, well, our previous one was successful, we'll just keep that name?
I think it's dependent on how Nintendo's going to look at their next system. Are they going to look at it as a home console, or are they going to view it as a handheld? Because their handhelds generally tend to kind of repeat naming conventions. You had the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, then you had the Nintendo DS, the DS Lite, the DSi, the 3DS, the 2DS, the 3DS XL, the new 3DS, the new 2DS. So I think
was there a new 2DS?
There was a new 2DS XL is a hinge, like a clamshell 2DS. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, but it does not have the 3D capability on the top screen.
No, yeah, it's weird. I know of the 2DS. I didn't know there was a quote-unquote new 2DS, but whatever, anyway.
I think it was that's
what I mean by the familiar
that was released.
Sure, that makes sense.
So, yeah, I mean, I think their home consoles tend to have maybe less creative names, Wii and GameCube aside. So who knows? I think it would be... I would like a new name, but I think they might view it as a mistake, because the Switch is so insanely popular and successful that kind of moving on from that nomenclature might be kind of a misfire for them. At least that's how I would see it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. If they look at it like a portable, they'll probably keep the name Switch on it. It's, especially with it being potentially the most successful system ever made. It might pass the PS2 by the end of its lifetime. I don't think it has yet, but that's still very much in the cards.
It's absolutely possible, especially if they do a price drop.
Yeah, which is kind of insane that they never have. But I guess when you're printing money, you don't really need to, do you?
Yeah, I mean, they priced it pretty competitively anyway compared to its competition, so they never saw the need.
Yeah, in 2017.
Yeah, exactly.
It's insane. The Switch has been out for 7 years.
Yeah, we're all old and we're all going to die.
Yep. All right, Abdullah, do you have any thoughts on this?
Not much. Pretty much similar to what you guys said, especially with the naming thing. I also would love if it's called the Super Nintendo Switch. Yeah, I think it's a fitting.
That option's just sitting there, and it's super easy.
It's a fitting. Like it. And it might prove successful, right? Like how the NES and SNES thing did.
Well, let me ask you this then. Would you be interested in, let's get rid of the whole Pro model concept. So this isn't the new 3DS. Okay, so this would be like going from the DS to the 3DS. Would you both be, especially you, Abdullah, because you're more of a Nintendo guy than either of us, would you be interested in a new console from them this year, or would you prefer they...
Personally, I'm enjoying the Switch currently, so I think maybe a year from now. But overall, I'd be interested in it, but financially not, though. Because I'd have to get that.
That's fair enough. Right, of course. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, obviously, it very well could come out this year. I just don't... With the Switch doing so well, and them, as Rob pointed out, having not even really entertained a price drop, I just don't see why they would suddenly do that. It would kind of remind me, if I want to go to one historical example, it would kind of remind me of like when Atari just suddenly dropped the 5200 while the 2600 was doing really well. And then had to abandon it in favor of keeping the 2600. Like, I'm not saying that's what would happen. It just doesn't seem like the market is right for it. Even though people will complain and say they want an upgraded Switch hardware, etc., it doesn't seem like the financial element of it actually backs that, because people are still going out and supporting that system emphatically.
Yes, and it's still growing strong.
I think the game release lineup is stacked for 2024. There's a ton of stuff, first-party stuff coming out from Nintendo for the Switch. So, and like the games that they've released in the past year, your Tears of the Kingdom, even your Super Mario Wonder are looking and playing phenomenally on the Switch, because you're getting to the point in a system's life cycle where you really know how to kind of game the hardware in order to get games looking as good as they possibly can, or run as good as as possible. And who knows, like, what I mean, the fact that this is effectively an Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 is stunning. And that they're getting stuff to run on it.
You're talking about the Switch?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far back. It's more like a slightly watered down Xbox One base VCR model. Not that that's a whole bunch of distinct, but I get your point. But that makes me think that whatever this would be, if it came out this year, I think your best case scenario is like a PS4 Pro in your pocket, which is kind of what I've always said. And based on, again, if you believe any of these leaks, it would be kind of similar to that projection. Now, the question is, would you guys be happy with that? Because I know a lot of people are like, can't they just make a system that's like on par? And the answer to that question is no, they're not going to do that. But you personally, would you guys be happy with that?
I would. I mean, because it's about the games, dummy. It's as long as the games are good and they're running well and playing well and looking good, it's like, who the fuck cares? It's like, yeah, they could do a Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck can do super high resolution, super high frame rate, playing modern games on the go. But like, if they gave us something akin to like a PlayStation 4 or PS4 Pro, I think like they could maybe use creative thinking, like using an AI upscaler in their system to kind of, the games are running at 1080p, but it's faking 4K. I think that's the way Nintendo's going to look at it. They're always going to release kind of underpowered hardware. That's their MO.
It's always been.
Yeah, ever since. Yeah, well, not always, but
up to the GameCube.
Pretty much. Yeah. Well, to be fair, I mean, they've never had the most advanced piece of tech in any given generation, but at least they tried until the GameCube. GameCube was the last hurrah in that regard, because after that they were just they kind of went all out, and they were beaten by everybody except for the Dreamcast, which was pretty much defunct before the GameCube even came out. So and I guess the new one. Anyway, we don't need to do the history lesson. But speaking of the GameCube, let's move on to our next little subject here, because I'm assuming you guys are kind of good on that one. So there was a new ODE for the GameCube, which I think it's up for pre-order at the time I'm looking at this, but there are some reviewers that have it in hand. It is called the Flippy drive. Rob, this is your favorite system?
Yes.
Did you looked into this at all?
I did not know about this until last night when you texted me the subjects list, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I watched a video kind of preview on it, and I am very intrigued. This is a fascinating piece of hardware.
Well, why don't you tell the audience all about it?
So, in the past few years, kind of the in vogue method of getting, game backups playing on original hardware on disk systems, especially, are things called ODEs, optical disk drive emulators, where you're able to kind of trick your console into playing games off of an SD card by either circumventing the disk drive, or using something like a satiator on a Saturn, or that one that goes on the GameCube on the underside port. I can't remember what it's called. But,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, or something that you cannibalize a disk drive and replace it with an SD card slot, which historically that's what you've done in a lot of your consoles, but I never really liked that idea because it meant cannibalizing a disk drive in order to do so. I want to be able to kind of have my cake and eat it too, play physical discs, but also have the option to play them off of a SD card. So something like the satiator really on the Saturn really appealed to me. The GameCube Flippy drive is effectively that. But the remarkable thing is, like a satiator, there's no soldering required, very little in the way of modification. You don't have to cut holes into your console shell. Basically, what this is an SD card reader that attaches to a internal circuit board port within the GameCube. If you take your GameCube apart, there's a port, and basically this kit attaches to any existing components on the inside of the GameCube, and kind of attaches to this port, and then you put it back together. You put an SD card in that, and you are able to play backup games through an SD card without any serious modification to the GameCube. And the interesting thing is that they're not using Swiss like most other GameCube mods are doing. They're using kind of their own special thing, which looks kind of like the GameCube operating system, like the memory card viewer. Really interesting. And the most interesting part about this, at least in my opinion, is once again the ease of how to get this thing installed. The only tool you need is a Phillips head screwdriver, and that it's only $38 for this. That's incredibly reasonably priced. And if anybody with a basic working knowledge of how to disassemble a game system and put it back together can do this, it's phenomenal. Really, really interested.
Yeah, but my thought is, I agree with all that. And the only downside to it, the one thing that would have really sold me on this And I can understand why they didn't do it because it doesn't allow for the space. But it would be really nice rather than being reliant on SD cards, which it really annoys me. It's like, especially because when you get to this thing and you have to like open it up constantly to get to the SD card, provided you ever want to update it or whatever, would have been, let's say, easier access to be able to connect an SSD. I personally prefer, SSDs. Now, granted, I understand the space isn't there for that. So, like, the only way you could kind of do that clean rather than just having it, like, hang off the console, like, through a hole or something, would have to be, like, to kind of wire it up and then have it sit, like, inside the space for the Game Boy player. That's theoretically what you can make it do to look nice. But that was one of the things that really sold me on the mode for the Dreamcast and for the Saturn, is the ability to use an SSD, because not a whole lot of ODEs actually do that. Just because I find them to be, not only do they operate better, but they also have much longer lifespans. But this is a great idea, and I'm sure it actually is great in practice. It's just that would be without even using it, my first, I would like an SSD, and I would like it that I don't have to open up the console every time I want to update it. But then again, to be fair, with the mode, I have to do that anyway. I have to open up the console to get the SSD anyway.
It does look interesting, but I probably would like to read more into it. And the way it's structured, that you don't need soldering, you don't need a lot of you don't need to be that techy to install it. So add that to the GameCube itself, and I think it does look promising. Probably might get one, but let's just see how it goes.
I mean, for $38, I mean, he's right. Like, that's like, for something like this is almost like, ass wipe money. I mean, like, that's really not bad for something that's like unlocks your GameCube that much, especially with that level of ease. So I can see a lot of people being interested in this. Actually, I do want to address one of Rob's points, though, at the beginning about the disc drive. Like, I'm actually with you. Obviously, I pro physical media and I like having it there. The only reason I've been so willing to sacrifice the disc drive in a lot of cases is just because I have so many consoles. Like, I have like 12 GameCubes. So it's like, if I need to use an actual disc-based system, trust me, it's fine. I got a bunch. Same with the Dreamcast, Saturn, whatever it is. But if you're like, hey, I'm a reasonable person, I just want one, then yes, I get that completely. So having the option to have both is, of course, good. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe one day I'll get one of these and do a video. Who knows? Anything else from either of you on this?
No. Let's keep going.
All right. Okay. Well, Abdullah, even though you didn't pick them, I hope you enjoyed our little lightning round of subjects that are all yours. You totally chose all of them. So
yeah, perfect. That was all good.
Yeah. Yeah. So our next subject, it comes from a Patreon backer whose name is Spencer Peryear, who is at the tier in which he gets to pick a subject every month. Actually, to Spencer's credit, he's actually at the tier in which he could be on the podcast every single month, and he always chooses not to. He always chooses to just have us do a subject. Sometimes he's got one, sometimes he doesn't, but that means he's just that generous of a guy. So huge shout out to Spencer. He doesn't get enough credit. The channel really, really uses his support, so thank you. But the subject he had was very just kind of general. It's just kind of a good feelings one, so I thought we could all just kind of come up with something here. He just said, what is your number one gaming hope in 2024? Does anybody have anything they're like super looking forward to that they either are hoping for with no evidence of, or something they know is coming that they're super excited about?
Can I start on this one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so this can be quite interesting because I happen to not have a specific modern gaming goal, but more on a retro side of it, on the collecting scene. So
sure.
I hope that prices get better. I mean, they're not going to go to the way they were, but I hope that they get better and I can get to collecting the same way I used to do before.
Yeah, I was going to say your situation's a little different because, like, I mean, let's just be honest, like Rob knows, like, as Americans, we're a little, spoiled because it's easier for us to get stuff like that because we live in one of the primary markets for video games. In the UAE, like, that's not the case. So everything you do is kind of through import, right? So it's just kind of like you have to luck out a lot more often than we do. So yeah, I can see why that's more of a pain for you. So, but all the same, I think we all agree it would be nice if video game prices dropped in general, just so we can all have more fun. But yeah, I mean, you got me thinking here because originally I was gonna aim this question towards like, what's your like number one hope as far as like something getting announced or something finally coming out or whatever it is. But yeah, I think making it more personal on like an individual goal you might have for the year. Part of me, I don't think I could actually commit to this, but part of me is like, I would really love it in 2024 if I finished the OG Xbox set. But I just don't see that as being in the cards yet. But maybe, I don't know. As far as like potential announcements, I mean, obviously I'm always fangirling for the possibility of a Shenmue 4, but there's no current evidence to think that that's going to happen this year anyway. But not impossible, I suppose. And as for things that I don't know, I'd have to look at the release list. It's like Rob said it best, like this year's kind of stacked already with a bunch of stuff, so I'd have to kind of look over and be like, oh, that's the one. But I guess off the top of my head, there's nothing that I'm like super crazy looking forward to that I for sure know is coming this year. As you guys can imagine, it's been kind of a dramatic week for me with the channel stuff, so that it hasn't been my highest priority to look that up. But yeah, Rob, what about you?
So this has to do more with kind of like speculation about like next gen systems, specifically our Switch
Sure.
2. I really like if the Switch 2 does get announced this year, which I think as a betting man, I think we would all say that like there's a pretty good chance that it at least gets announced this year. I'm hoping for a peaceful transition of power, as it were, between the Switch and Switch 2. In that, I'm desperately hoping for backwards compatibility, as I think most people would be, but also specifically, I hope that Nintendo decides to finally join the 21st century and merge their stores going from Switch to Switch 2. In that, when you had your Wii U, if you were to download games or DLC via the Nintendo shop, those did not transfer from the Wii U to the Switch. People always say it's like, oh, I've been buying Super Mario Brothers like 20 times since it was released. It's like what I really hope is that if this system is backwards compatible, that the Nintendo accounts, the shop, and everything will continue into the next console. I would really like to see that. If you own a game, on the Switch, you'll be able to play it and re-download it onto the Switch 2. I hope that if you have DLC for a game, let's say Breath of the Wild DLC, and you're able to play your Breath of the Wild on the next Switch, that your DLC will be able to move over. I think some of this could be a bit of a pipe dream, but I mean, imagine having the Switch eShop especially is incredible. It's massive. There's so much stuff on there. My biggest critique of the Switch eShop is the fact that it's difficult to navigate. If they're able to push through all of those games in the way that Xbox did, in the way that PlayStation did, going from the Xbox One to the Xbox Series, from the PS4 to the PS5, that would be phenomenal. That means your new Switch, you could already play, thousands of digital games, and then your thousands of physical games on top of it. That's my big hope.
So, I know we kind of talked about this Switch 2 stuff, and now we kind of turned around and talking about it again, but I wanted to kind of amend something, and it goes off of what you said there, about Nintendo's time cycles for announcements. So if I asked you, either of you, off the top of your head, do you recall when Nintendo's first official statement about the Nintendo Switch was?
It was, well, I mean, the NX or the Switch?
NX would count, yes.
Oh, well, so the NX was like 2015, I think they mentioned it. 2016 at the, no, it'd be like 2015 or 2014.
Yes, that is correct. It's 2015. And that was off the back of a system that failed. So the reason they did that was that they wanted to bolster market share and let people know, hey, we're not giving up anything. We're still in this, even though the Wii U is not successful. Yeah. That's after a failure. So people point at that and say, well, yeah, of course that was such an early jump because the system was not successful. Let me ask you this. Do you remember what Project Cafe was off the top of your head? Rob, maybe?
Project Cafe, was that the 3DS or the...
No, that was the Wii U.
The Wii U. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Right. Do you know when that was announced?
When the Wii U was announced, that was...
When Project Cafe was official.
Yeah, it came out in... the system came out in 2013 or 2012?
The system came out in 2012. I'm asking you, do you know when Nintendo said Project Cafe is real and it's the Wii U?
2011.
Yes, summer of 2011. So over almost a year and a half before the system actually released. My point is, and that was off the back of the Wii, which was a success. So their average timetable is, believe it or not, about 2 years, maybe a year and a half, somewhere in between there, if you want to kind of, average it out. And that goes for either a failure of a system or a success of a system. I do not think, considering that it is already 2024, and the Switch has not reduced its price at all. Nintendo has said absolutely nothing about this. I can't imagine they would suddenly, go with the Sega logic of, E3 1995 and they're like, oh, by the way, it's out now. Jump the launch date type of thing for no reason. I do not think that even if they announce... I can't imagine just announcing the successor to the system tomorrow and then being like, okay, and then it comes out in September. Like, that's such a short window for their history. I don't see them doing that. All the more reason I think that you're probably right. They might announce it this year, and then, like, best case scenario, you actually see it physically exist next year.
I think at least how I feel they would do it, because they've not mentioned anything. They've not mentioned that they're developing a system. They haven't mentioned any project name. It's all been through the grapevine. What I would expect is one of two options. It's really dependent on when they want to release this, because if you recall, the Switch was released in March of 2017. But it was first revealed in, I believe, September or October of 2016 in that first trailer. And then you had your official announcement, presentation, reveal in January of 2017. So if they wanted to release this thing in a similar time frame and avoid the holidays, I could see them September Direct dropping a teaser trailer for the system, and then at the beginning of the new year and do something similar. Yeah. If they wanted to get this out in time for the holidays, once again, quite possible. I think that you would see a direct maybe around the former E3 time, your June or July. That would be your reveal trailer. And then you could have a press release, a separate direct, talking about the system specifically, all the details, price, and everything, with a release date for, November or, somewhere around those parts. I don't know. It just feels like they're going to, Nintendo has changed in the way they operate, really, starting with the Switch, in the way they announce things. They kind of shadow drop stuff now. I think they don't want to announce something 2 years out anymore. They're once bitten, twice shy with stuff like Metroid Prime 4. So, they shadow drop the Switch Lite. They shadow drop the Switch OLED. I think, that a reveal trailer this year is reasonable, with a release either late this year or early next year.
Yeah, there's a lot of logic to that. I will say the thing with Nintendo is the normal rules of logic don't tend to apply, so they're very hard to predict as a result of that. Like, most of us would have been like, all right, well, then, they'll probably drop the price of the Switch, a year before they come up with a successor, just to kind of start moving units out and make a little more money off the system. But then it's Nintendo, so they're like, no, well, if anything, we'll increase the price and you'll still buy it. It doesn't, you never know with them.
I do just want to add something very quickly. This isn't on the subject list, but it is kind of tangentially related, especially to what you just mentioned, is that there is a bit of rumor that we could be getting a Switch, another kind of like rumor lending credence to the fact that a Switch successor could be coming out, is that physical copies of a lot of Nintendo's kind of big tentpole games released for the Switch are disappearing from shelves. They're not getting new shipments in. This includes stuff like Mario Odyssey, the Kirby games, some of the Zelda games, Pokemon games, Splatoon games. Like, they're not as readily available anymore. Now, you could say this could be like, scarcity kind of a thing, but it could be something that they're going to be replacing those SKUs with greatest hits versions of those games at lower prices. Or they could be looking to rebrand those and re-release them for a successor system. As said, this is just kind of stuff that people have been mentioning online the past, couple weeks. But
yeah, I've actually noticed that
could
happening.
Be more evidence. Yeah,
it's been happening here. We tried. It was Pokemon Violet. We're trying to find a copy of it, and it's just been out everywhere. It's sold out everywhere. So maybe that could be a possibility.
Yeah, I know a lot of people were talking about that as being the setup for Nintendo Selects versions, which is a very serious possibility. But yeah, we don't actually know. That's the problem with Nintendo. It's like you can guess and use logic a lot, but like it's Nintendo.
They're tight-lipped, yeah.
Yeah. All right. If I think we're good there. So huge shout out to Spencer Purrier. Thank you very much, as always, for supporting the podcast. So next up, speaking of people who support it, we've got a round of shout outs here from the following people. We've got Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Thank you so much for the support. All of you, you are awesome. And thank you, Abdullah, as always, for joining us. Appreciate having you around, dude.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be here always.
And we're back. So Joseph has joined us now. How are you doing, Joseph?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me back on, Adam.
As always, my pleasure. Rob is still here. How you doing, Rob?
I'm still here. I'm doing all right. How y'all doing?
We're pretty good, I think. So we'll just continue with the format. Now, Joseph, I think we talked about this briefly. The plan is to just kind of power through a bunch of random subjects that we found just kind of fascinating, because you didn't have one in mind, and it was just kind of whatever. Let's just do it, right? So, so appreciate you sort of picking these by just allowing us to say that you did. Okay, so the first one I wanted to talk about here is Vectorman PS2 finally leaked. Rob, do you know anything about this?
No, I do not. I mean, I heard that there was a Vectorman game in development, but it didn't get very far. I don't know.
Yeah, so Vectorman, if anybody remembers, was a character that Sega made on the Sega Genesis 1. They had a Vectorman 1 and a Vectorman 2. And then they were working on Vectorman 3 on the PlayStation 2 back in that, that era. Like, they had just finished the Dreamcast, and now they were making games for everybody. From my understanding, I don't know if it was the same team that made that really bad Altered Beast PS2 game that only came out in Europe, or what exactly happened, but I think that game played a role in why Vectorman PS2 never came out. But it was like a known thing to exist, but only a few weeks ago at the time of this recording, it was suddenly like dumped online. There's actually 11 different builds of it, which is insane, to the point where I'm like, I don't even know which one to like check out, because I don't know if one is the most playable or like what the deal is. But I'm also just found it fascinating that something like that would actually resurface after all this time. You guys have any thoughts on that at all?
I mean, it is. I didn't even know that there was a Vectorman PS2 game in development at all. So this entire thing was news to me. But when you think about it, it does make sense that they were attempting it. I mean, when you think of Sega, one of the games that you actually think of is Vectorman, even if you've never played it. So
I gotta disagree with that. I mean, who the fuck has nostalgia for those games? I mean...
Oh, I don't have nostalgia for it. I just remember it.
They're like known Sega games. I don't know. It's like the funny thing I always thought about Vectorman is like that was their response to like Donkey Kong Country, if I recall. Like kind of the pre-rendered assets and like 3D models on a 2D plane. I mean,
you're correct to the point where it was called Vector Man.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, it's so soulless. It's like kind of one of those like late Genesis like game series that I'm just like, ugh, I don't know. Like, but they put it on like every compilation, you know, anytime there's like a Genesis mini or something, like, oh, put a Vectorman game on there. I guarantee you that I don't care if this Vectorman game for the PS2 was going to be like the best fucking game of the 6th generation, nobody was going to play that shit. I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean, I don't disagree with you.
It's like the Altered Beast game on the PS2.
The one that actually came out.
Yeah.
That one's widely regarded as one of like the worst games on the system, which is kind of hilarious. That's probably why it never got released outside of Europe. And I do think it had an effect on this.
I mean, granted, I think the Altered Beast game was one of the worst games on the Genesis as well, but I won't say that too loud.
You know, the funny thing is, I never thought Altered Beast was actually all that great. It's. I think the arcade version's better, but it was never one of my favorites. And I know people love that franchise, but it's like, is it even a franchise? Like, it has.
Well, yes, because there are more than one Altered Beast game. There's the arcade/Genesis one,
there's the Master
and then
System.
there's the crappy PS2 one.
That's what I mean, though. Like, is that a franchise?
It is technically a franchise.
One game that people remember and say, like, it's a franchise because of that. I don't know. And you guys listening would never think we're all big kind of Sega guys. Well, at least Rob and I are. but yeah, no, the Vectorman thing, I kind of agree with Rob's basic point that Vectorman, his whole premise worked best in the concept of the Genesis, where it was meant to look kind of 3D-ish in a 2D environment due to the technology they were using. Having him outside of that is not impossible to pull off, but it was just kind of like, who cares now? And maybe that was the conclusion they came to. Although you'd be surprised with that whole big Sega announcement, like, you know, last month. There were a lot of people saying they'd really want a new Vectorman game, and I'm like, do you actually want it, or do you just have nostalgia?
You want it?
Yeah. And
yeah,
Rob,
I mean, like I said, I don't have nostalgia for Vectorman, but if you had asked my whatever age I was when the PS2 came out self to think of Sega games, I would have obviously said Sonic. I would have said Echo. I would have probably said Streets of Rage, and I would have said Vectorman. So,
yeah, I think a lot of people know the character mostly because at least that first game was kind of plastered on everything. They definitely released that on a lot of stuff, and I think part of the reason they re-released it so much is because they own it like lock, stock, and barrel with no licensing problems. And it at least has enough of a base that people remember it. The fact that it had a sequel at all does technically make it a franchise, as we kind of discussed before. So that's probably plays a role in that, because there's a lot of one and done games on the Genesis that people don't have nostalgia for, even if they're better games. So I don't know, but it is what it is. So yeah, it's out there. If you want to try the PS2 version, it's available-ish if you have like the right capabilities to pursue it. So we'll move on from that. Speaking of PlayStation weirdness, did you guys hear about the Alien Resurrection exploit for the PS1 that was just kind of discovered?
That's one that lets you run unsigned code on the PS1?
Yes. Rob, had you heard about this?
I did not hear about this until you kind of dropped the subject list. You know, it's interesting. You know, it unlocks the potential of, I don't know, like PS1 homebrew, but at least being able to run burn games or whatever.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's fascinating for two reasons. One, the fact that this was in there and never discovered, and two, that people care about this in 2024. Like, I mean, there's a million ways to hack up a PS1 now and play PS1 games, like, through, say, illegitimate means. And the reason I say people care about it is not just, is it nerds talking about it and that's fascinating for 20 seconds. If you go to like eBay, the price of that game shot up like crazy because now everybody wants a copy to be able to like hack their PS1. And it's like, what
that's
year
stupid.
Is it? I know. What year is it where you like feel this is necessary? But
I I don't understand that. Like, the only people who, in theory, should even hear about this enough and care about it are people who have to know that things like the X Station or the PSIO exist. Like,
yeah, I mean, I just don't know who is sitting there being like, all right, I really want to play burned PS1 games in 2024, but I think the most logical method is to get a copy of Alien Resurrection and go through that. Like, who is that guy? Like, that approach would have made sense in like 1997, but now I don't know. It's more like, it's just funny to me. Like, if this didn't affect the price of the game, then I would just say this is interesting. But the fact that there are actually people like going nuts over this, I think, is what makes it silly.
So are people actually paying the prices, or are people just posting it for ridiculous prices?
Definitely people are posting it. I don't know how many people have actually purchased it, to be fair. I think some have, for certain, because they now see it as like this valuable PS1 asset where it can theoretically do that. But I question why anybody would care about that at this point. Not that it's not worth caring about the PS1 or anything like that. It's just that, like, if you want to hack a PS1 at this point, it's strange to me that would be like your way of wanting to do it, unless it's like so easy that it's kind of hard to ignore. It just reminds me of, like, you know how you can soft mod the original Xbox by using Agent Under Fire, the James Bond game. It's like that game is still not super expensive to my knowledge. That exploit has existed forever. So it's just kind of interesting that, you know, now that this exists, that people are kind of going nuts for it. But I imagine
someone paid $210 for a complete in-box copy of Alien Resurrection.
There you go. I'm not. That's like one guy, presumably. But yeah, the point is, like, there are people who are actually into this. So whatever. Any other thoughts on this? Did any of you even play that game? I've never played it. I actually thought for a bit it was.
I played the Alien Trilogy on PS1, but that's the only Alien game that I did.
Yeah. It is, to me, just funny how long it took for anybody to notice that. But, oh well. Speaking of things that were never noticed, this is another one that I found fascinating. Do either of you remember Clockwork Knight? Well, it is a franchise. Clockwork Knight 1 and 2 for the Sega Saturn?
I have both.
I own the first one. Never actually got around to really playing it. But
I'm a little shocked that you both have that. That's kind of cool, actually.
I started looking for Saturn stuff and found a copy. So...
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting Saturn franchises that Sega did. That's one of the weird things about the Saturn, is that so many of the established Sega IPs didn't exist on it, established up to that point, and it created so many new ones that have just like never seen the light of day again. Obviously, Burning Rangers, Clockwork Knight, the Bug franchise, stuff like that. But yeah, Clockwork Knights is interesting. What happened, if you guys saw this, so Clockwork Knight 2, it was only recently discovered there's a cheat code in that game that you can hit up at the menu, and if you hit the sequence correctly, it actually unlocks the entirety of Clockwork Knight 1 for you to play. And what's stunning about that is how nobody has figured that out, and how nobody ever noticed that, like, within the code of the game. Like, I mean, it's been archived a million times, all that. How nobody ever figured that one out is fascinating to me. And it just kind of shows that there are so many things in retro games that are oddly still not discovered, and that's just kind of baffling. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I mean, we should also clarify that this is literally just for the US version of Clockwork Knight 2.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's because apparently there was a compilation version released in Japan that had both games, and that's what our Clockwork Knight 2 is based off of.
Yeah, correct. And it's what's fun. I'm just saying it's funny that they never bothered to like let out the secret, or if they were like, well, if we're just going to clone that over and we just don't want Clockwork Knight 1 to work, that they would just like disable the cheat code. But they didn't. They left it there, and just nobody ever noticed.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a relic of, back on the playground, in school when you were a kid in the 90s, like you were, like talk with friends, like, oh, do you know if you did this, like this cheat code, you can get like infinite lives, or like, oh, there's like a whole secret thing in here. Like, so many of that, like, aura around video games is missing now because of the internet and like being able to dump entire game source code and kind of like analyze every little line of data. So it's like, this is kind of like a little throwback, which I think is kind of neat. I don't know.
I agree. It gives me a little nostalgia berries for those like rumors. Although this one turned out to actually be true. Although to be fair, I don't remember anybody ever talking about this one. But I like the idea.
No kids were talking about Clockwork Night on the playground.
No. Well, not in this country anyway. But yeah. Well, anything else to say on that?
No.
I just find it interesting that they just brought a compilation version of the game over to make the US version of it too, and just didn't do the standalone one. I assume there must have been some major bug fixes in the compilation or something, because otherwise it makes no sense.
I agree, and I don't know. It tells you how little Sega of North America anyway put into the Saturn as far as concern. Because if they were just whatever, just leave it in there and just hopefully no one ever notices. I mean, that seems to
not
be the
really
approach.
Surprising. Everyone at Sega of America who actually cared about Sega of America had left by that point.
Yeah. And so they were just whatever, it's just easier to just have it there and hide it. But why they didn't keep, I don't know, if you were truly going to hide it, it's just strange that you would leave it into a cheat code, unless that was just one developer who was
that was probably one dev who just left it in. Because remember, in the compilation, it wouldn't have been a cheat code, it would have been a menu option.
Right, exactly. So I'm wondering if the voice on high at Sega of America basically said, all right, it takes too much work to get rid of the game entirely, so just, disable the option to get it. Did some vindictive programmer then put in the cheat code without the higher-ups knowing? Or did they say, let it put a cheat code in there, and then if they're smart enough and they figured out they can play it, and corporate was on board? You know what I'm saying? Which
corporate definitely wasn't on board.
Yeah, I know that Sega has a history of some of their devs doing stupid stuff in their games without their authorization. I think it was the Sega Smash Pack for the Dreamcast actually had, if you were good enough at ripping Dreamcast content, it actually had instructions inside of it that specifically was written to, I think it was Echelon, which was the group that was ripping Dreamcast games. And it specifically gave them instructions on how to use it for a Genesis emulator on the Dreamcast. That's the kind of stuff they were getting away with. It was literally addressed to the hackers and be like, here, use this. This is how it works. So I don't think Sega's quality control for that kind of thing was all that great at the time.
No. I mean, keep in mind, when the whole... Well, actually, I don't really know how much of a mess... I mean, obviously it was a bit of a mess if something like this happened. I can't imagine it was not a mess during those years.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I didn't have this one on the list, but I'll just do it really quickly. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Pseudo Saturn. It's a boot cartridge you can put into the Saturn that allows it to play burn games and unsigned code and stuff.
I know about those. Yeah.
Okay, so they I don't know who did it. The group that made those just did a giant update for it, so it has all sorts of new features. I don't know what all of them are, but anybody out there who has a Pseudo Saturn, this is kind of me saying hey, maybe look into this. You might find some of these features interesting. I think it has a lot more cheat code support and a bunch of other stuff, but I don't know all the details. But apparently it's a massive update for the thing, and the only way to update it is you have to burn it to a disk, and then you use Pseudo Saturn itself to launch it, because it's just a burned Saturn ISO, and then you run it from there. So if anybody out there cares, that's a thing now. Okay, so Joseph, thank you for those subjects, sort of. You want to move on?
Yeah, we still have more subjects to go through.
Oh, we got a bunch. Yes. But, okay. So I'm just giving you a shout out. Okay. So the next one up is from a guy named Sinjeet. Sinjeet is another Patreon backer who gets to choose a subject every month. However, he too had nothing specific for us to talk about. So I thought, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to continue going down these rapid fire subjects and see what everybody thinks. So the first one that I have done on Sinjeet's behalf is Tomb Raider, beloved franchise that started off, funny enough, on the Sega Saturn. Now has a demake, if you want to call it that is kind of, running on the 32X. Did you guys hear about this?
Not until you brought it up.
Yeah.
But this is really... The fact that this functions at all is amazing and really cool. So
I agree. There's been an odd amount of Tomb Raider love on Sega hardware lately. I think Joseph, you and I talked about this briefly. A couple months ago, somebody got all the PC exclusive DLC for Tomb Raider 1 to now run fully playable on the Saturn version. And now somebody's building Tomb Raider for the 32X, like from the ground up, as far as I can tell. And, you know, it's like, that's interesting. And does that actually show us what the 32X was capable of? Or is it, do you think this will ever get finished? I've seen the footage, like for the 32X, it looks good. It certainly looks inferior to like the Saturn version, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure it necessarily is going to show like what the 32X could do, because keep in mind, this is 20 plus years onwards where people, in theory, have been able to poke at the 32X for a while, and this is a bunch of stuff that actual developers at the time might not have been able to do, even if they had the money to do it. We also don't know how much of the game is going to actually be able to function on a 32X as well.
Correct. Also, not to make you feel old, but believe it or not, this year the 32X turns 30. So
Wait,
enjoy
what?
that. Yeah, it came out in 1994. So 2004 would be 10.
Damn.
2014.
I mean, yeah,
20.
granted, I mean, I got my Genesis when I was 5, but which, okay, yeah, I would have been 7. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, everybody, it just gets worse. You get older. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest, as cool as this is, I can't imagine I would ever actually sit down and play this. But that's just me. I would actually be more interested in seeing, and I've said this in videos like years ago, it would be very interesting to see what somebody with enough dedication, passion, and I guess time could squeeze out of the Sega CD 32X combo. Like if you're using the additional hardware capabilities of both of those and just see like what you can actually do rather than those FMV games we got that just kind of gave us better color. I would be curious to see what that could do. But
I mean, this would definitely be a game to use as a use case for that.
Yeah, if that's what whoever's developing this actually decided to do. I'm just curious, like, if it's actually... Because I don't know, other than better audio, I don't know what else... And I guess video capabilities. I don't know what else the Sega CD could offer to the 32X that it can't already do on its own. Because I'm not a developer or programmer. But I at least know that the 32X itself can't really do video and obviously would have inferior audio to the Sega CD. But yeah,
mainly storage space, honestly.
Yeah, that would also be a factor for sure. Although, given that most of these things would likely run off of like EverDrives at this point rather than repro cards, that may not be as big of a deal anymore. But I guess I don't know that either because I don't know what the limitations are for the cartridge like bus or if it has.
Yeah, like there would in theory be an actual limit to how big the cartridge could be.
Sure.
Or a ROM in this case could be.
Do you know what it is?
No, not for the 32X.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I could definitely be wrong about this because I'm operating off of a very old memory. I kind of think. Do you remember that game, the Sega Paprium for the Sega Genesis, the one that was like a big fan made game a few years ago? I think that they claimed the size of the cart was like 128 megabytes or something, but I could definitely be wrong about that. That's just like a fleeting memory from years ago. But if that's the case, that's kind of interesting because that's far higher than any other Genesis game by a landslide. But I could definitely be wrong about that.
Anyway. I guess with like a memory mapper or something like how the NES used, you could in theory make bigger and bigger cartridges. But
yeah, I know. Who cares?
Yeah, that's getting into it. But I mean, generally, like as far as like games that were made at the time that these were relevant. That would have been probably, like, assuming that the Sega CD and 32X had, like, miraculously actually taken off, that would have probably been, and if we had gotten actual 32X CD games, that would have been what it was used for.
Sure. All right, let's go back in time here. We're going back to 1994, sort of. Let me ask you both this. 32X is out. You actually think it's going to be successful. What are the games you would like to see either brought to it that, let's just cheat a little and say that are coming to other systems in the future, or games from the Genesis or Super Nintendo you would like to see, shall we say, remastered editions for, if we want to use a more modern term, on the 32X? Anything?
I would have liked to see Rayman on the 32X.
Ooh, that's a good choice.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's not too 3D intensive. It is a 2D game. Wider color palette of the 32X is obviously going to help that. And it's running on stuff like the Jaguar and the Saturn, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could have got that to run on it.
Oh, I agree. I'm sure it would have been hardware-wise capable of it. Yeah,
Now,
part of
I
me
never
is...
played this one, but maybe 1 or 2. Like if the CD and 32X were both like together.
That's a good idea. Part of me would have liked to have seen, like what Nintendo did by the Mario All-Stars collection, where they basically made 16-bit remakes of the NES games. It would have been interesting to see Sega do that with the Sonic trilogy, basically on the Genesis, onto the 32X. Making it look kind of like Knuckles Chaotix almost, but maybe a little bit beefier. It would have been, like, if they had made that, let's just put that out there. If they had ever made that, and it was still exclusive to the 32X, guaranteed that would be, like, one of the most high-end, expensive games on the system, if not the most.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And they are already started to kind of do that on the Genesis by the time the 32X was out. Like, they did that Sonic Classics thing where you get a cart where you get Sonic 1, 2, and what Mean Bean Machine, on a single cart. So, adding 3 and Knuckles on there, wouldn't necessarily be out of the question.
Yeah, but like I'm talking about, like, for lack of a better, cheesier way of putting it, a 32-bit remake of those games. I
absolutely hear that. Especially if you bring in like the CD audio of the Sega CD. Like, you could have done like some cool shit, and like have it be like, because Knuckles Chaotix, for all the hate that people level at that game, it's like it is a very good looking game.
Oh yeah.
So so if you could like kind of apply that kind of graphics level to those Genesis games, like absolutely.
I could be wrong about this, but that might be the only Sonic game still exclusive to Sega hardware. Can anybody think? Oh, Sonic Shuffle on Dreamcast, I think.
Unless you're talking like some of the Game Gear games, like is Sonic Labyrinth or something?
Yeah, all those have been brought over to like the GameCube. Like they're on the Gems collection and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even Sonic the Fighters, I'm thinking like Sonic Shuffle and Knuckles Chaotix.
Sonic 3D Blast Saturn version is still exclusive.
That is true. If you want to count that, but yeah. But then to be fair to the Saturn, we only got Sonic R off of it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But the thing we're talking about is they almost did it. That's like kind of what Sonic Jam is, but not really. It's like they just kind of. It almost seems like they had that idea and then just decided to go with it in a different direction. They're like, let's just use some of these Sonic Extreme assets that we've been building. Give them this like little world to walk around in, and then we'll just kind of throw some Genesis games on there and call it a day. Although to be fair to them, they did upgrade Sonic 1 with at least the spin dash capabilities, so that's neat.
Yeah, like Sonic Jam was definitely crap, we don't have a real Sonic game on the platform. We have to get something.
I agree. Yeah, and
after Extreme failed.
It just makes me think like as much as the 32X like is a butt of jokes, and rightly so now, it does make me think like there was a lot of potential in that if they could have just picked a street. But I think we kind of tackled that a lot in the last podcast. But anyway, so let's move on to something still nobody cares about. Did you guys hear that the Casio Loopy is getting a flash cart?
It sold out already,
and it sold out. Did you buy one? Be honest.
I did not.
Wow.
So the funny thing about that is there were a bunch of people in my Discord who were like, what? I need this. And it was sold out like right away. And it's funny too, because like I guarantee that the guy who made it only made like 10.
He made 15.
Okay, so I wasn't that far off.
Yeah. He even said, he's like, I thought my beta testers my beta testers accounted for half of the people who owned one of these things.
Pretty much. Now, to be fair, like the thing with the Loopy is you don't choose the Loopy; it chooses you. So it only comes to you when you've earned it. So that's why I have one. not everybody is selected. But that said, the Loopy only has like 11 titles on it, and I think one of those 11 was only like unearthed like a year or two ago, just because it's like the last one out the door. So there's not a whole lot of content on that system anyway. But it is interesting that we're finally getting a flash card for it. But yeah, he's right. Like there's not a whole lot of people that would really go out and buy a Loopy flash card. I'm not saying I would. I would do a video on it if I had it, but yeah, there's not too many people with a Loopy, so it doesn't really shock me that he didn't make that many of them. I am surprised it's actually 15. I was pretty sure it would be 10. I won't name names, but there was a flash card I was sent a while ago for a rather popular system. Well, not that popular, but popular enough that you've certainly heard of it. Where the company that sent it to me was like, yeah, we're sending you a review unit, but keep in mind we only made 10, so we're not really expecting it to do well. I was like, wow, really? And that's why it's hard to find. But they might make more. I think they did eventually. And this guy for the Loopy part is, which is good, I suppose. What do you guys think? Do you think I need to have one?
Yes.
I mean, for you, yeah. I'm honestly surprised that this came about with no connection to you whatsoever.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I don't know why I would be credited with it, other than I literally have made one video about the Loopy ever. Like,
I can't wait for the inevitable Apple Pippin ODE coming in 2024. Yeah.
I know this isn't one of the subjects, but I swear we talked about this once, where the idea was like, what system exists that still nobody has made that kind of solution for? With the Loopy now off the list, I think it is just the Pippin at this point. Does the Pippin stand alone?
Maybe?
The Nuon does have a scene, but there is no ODE per se. That is true.
Does the Nuon need it? I mean,
it has 8 games total. Actually, you know what's funny about that is the 8th game for that. We could have talked about this when it happened. I guess I'll bring it up. The 8th game for the Nuon is a Korean exclusive, like, coloring game based on some character. And it was just dumped for the first time ever, like a couple of months ago. And what's even stupider about it is it turns out the Nuon is region coded, so nobody can play the damn thing.
Okay, well, that actually solves my question of does it need an ODE, and the answer is yes, because it's region locked.
Well, so apparently the solution within the Nuon community, and yes, there is a Nuon community, and I props to them because they do exist. This is how you got that N64 controller adapter and all that. They're trying to like unlock the region coding on that particular game because it's the only region locked game, effectively, since most Nuon games were North America only. It's really the only place that anybody even kind of sort of cared about it. So it's, you know, okay. I just find that baffling. But yes, you're right. There is no ODE. And it's too bad. I don't think any model of that system has USB ports. But the other problem with it is I don't think you could make an ODE for it, considering every single model is like completely different under the hood. You know what I mean? Like it's a complete redesign from the ground up. That's like why the 3DO ODE only works in like one model of the system, as opposed to like every version. So I don't know if you could actually pull that off with the Nuon, and with only an 8-game library and a very small install base. I don't know, because at least with the Loopy, the card would be universal for everyone who does have it. So you got to give it that. As for the Pippin, it is funny that I am finding more and more people that actually have a Pippin, but it's, of course, just people like us who are like, yeah, I've got a Pippin, but that's it.
Yeah, like if I ran into a Pippin and it wasn't, like, ludicrously expensive, I'd probably pick one up.
Yeah. There's actually a guy in my Discord, shout out to Cax here, because he's a Patreon backer. He actually was in Japan, I think he still is at the time recording this, and he went to some store, I think it was in Nagoya, and they had like 5 Pippin games in stock, and he was like, he couldn't believe it, like you just never see that. He ended up buying one of them, which was Shockwave. I didn't even know Shockwave was on the Pippin. But to give you a sense of how expensive it is, it's $150 for Shockwave, and he still paid for it because it's not even a good game, but it's like a game of all time. That's the Pippin, man. I don't think there's any game on the Pippin I would actually pay a significant amount of money for, though. There's 2 I actually would want, but the thing is you can burn them, like Power Rangers Zeo or Marathon, which is like the precursor to Halo, basically, is on the Pippin, funny enough. But anyway, that's enough. That has nothing to do with the Loopy, so we'll go back on that. Yeah, I don't know. Are there any other thoughts on the Loopy flashcard?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Then we will move on. This was a very recent announcement that I thought was kind of interesting. Hyperkin decided to release, or just announced and will release, the OG. You remember on the original Xbox, they had two different controllers. It was the Duke, and then later on they did the Xbox S, which was the controller they gave it in Japan. The Xbox S controller is now coming to North America as an Xbox Series X controller. So presumably you can use that controller to play the backwards compatible titles, which has people all kind of excited that if they're doing this again, it does imply the possibility of another backwards compatibility update. Because, I mean, is there any reason to do this other than that? Because there's only like, what is it, like 40 games of the original Xbox are compatible with the Series X?
I don't think it has to do with the backwards compatibility. I think it's just like nostalgia berries.
Yeah, it's
that could be.
Wanting to get nostalgia money. How good was the Hyperkin Duke controller?
It was fine. I mean, you had to like the Duke to begin with. The quality of the controller itself was fine. The little screen was kind of neat.
Yeah.
The
quality was what I was in question, not like how good it was to actually use. So
yeah, I found the controller good. It's just that the problem with it is that it was the Duke. Like, that's not the way I would want to play the original Xbox anyway. So, like, it wasn't a great choice. And the irony is, and I did a video talking about this not too long ago, you can now use, if you have Project Stellar or other exploits for the original Xbox, ironically, you can now use an Xbox Series X controller on it. So it's kind of interesting to go back and forth like that. It's like it's just like a human psychological thing. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side, right? So let's just have everything work across. But I don't know. If I got one of those, like if Hyperkin sent me one or whatever, I would do a video on it, but I don't know if I would actually go out and buy it, because I don't know if I would only want to use it theoretically to play, OG Xbox games that are backwards compatible on the Series X. Like, I would never want to play this with like a modern release. But I don't know. Like, what about you guys?
Sense.
Would you, or would you just do it that way?
I would definitely. I mean, if I even bothered, I would definitely only use it for backwards compatible stuff. But again, that's if I even bothered. Like, I do have an OG Xbox, but I didn't grow up with the Xbox, like actually like owning the Xbox. So as far as I'm concerned, whatever. If I'm playing the backwards compatible game, the Series X controller would be fine.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's the thing that I look at the backwards compatibility for original Xbox, like especially, is that controller is like the S controller, that is good, but it's nowhere as good as a Xbox One or Xbox Series controller. Like, I'm just gonna play with that.
And functionally, like, there's no, like, it's not like you're even going to be, like, losing, like, buttons or anything. Like, the black and white buttons are what became the bumpers.
Yeah, I don't know. That's true. I think it's a nothing burger of nostalgia berries. It's like, they're gonna do it because they did the Duke, and they're like, well, we might as well do the S too, But I don't know.
All right, and then I guess we'll move on from that, because it sounds like we have nothing else to say on that. Yeah. Okay, so the last one up from this power round from Sinjit is this one I actually have more to say about. There is a new fan-made Shenmue game called Dreams of Saturn. Did either of you hear about this?
Not until today.
Yeah, all I saw was on like James Reiner's, shout out James, like his Facebook or whatever, like talking about it, but that's about it. Yeah.
So I'll tell you about this because I'm actually in the credits for this. So Shenmue is obviously my favorite game franchise of all time. And this is actually developed by a guy named George Kitchen. Now, George is a huge Shenmue fan. Him and his brother both are. And they're like the ones who donated to the Kickstarter, like so much so they got to like go to Japan and have dinner with Yu Suzuki and all that. They're really nice guys. I've hung out with them a few times. And George just kind of took it upon himself to learn how to program in Unity, and he just built like a Shenmue prequel game that is tongue-in-cheek and isn't necessarily to be considered canon, but it's just kind of fun to think of it is, and maybe it isn't. And it also is different because the way you play it in first person. Ryo can jump around, and it's a fun game with, you know, a lot of jokes in it. And it's just, if you're a Shenmue fan, it's kind of a must play. But it'll probably baffle you both to know that I did play this all the way through multiple times. And it's PC only, but it's freeware, so it's fine. I just launch it. It's just an executable. You just run it. But yeah, I actually was helping him bug test it. I found some issues and we worked on them. But if you're at all a Shenmue fan, it is a lot of fun to try out. You can play it with a controller now too, which was nice. But yeah, I can't imagine. I know, Rob, you've never even played Shenmue like regularly, so I don't think this is like anything you're gonna care about.
Same.
But
I mean, I tried, but I didn't get far.
That's fine. Shenmue is not for everybody, dude. It requires patience. The game was clearly made for Shenmue fans, like, primarily. So if you are one, and I know there's a lot of Shenmue fans that obviously watch this channel and listen to this stuff, and you for some reason haven't checked this out, you should check it out. You can get it at the Shenmue Dojo. It's free. George is still updating it. You know, he goes in. I think the latest release at the time of this recording is version 1.9. But yeah, there's also a few playthroughs out there. It's pretty neat, and I don't know what else the future lies, but I think, you know, George intends to not only keep updating it, but maybe make more stuff like this, and so that's pretty cool, at least from the Shenmue community, because we haven't got Shenmue 4 happening anytime soon, so it's kind of nice that we got something else to satiate our appetites. But yeah. And so with that, I guess we will bid you adieu. Thank you, Sinjeet, again, for your subject. Joseph, thank you very much for joining us, as always. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Always. Thank you again to we got Spencer Puryear, of course, before, and Abdullah for joining us as well. We also have shout-outs again. We got to Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Once again, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, Trey Wagner, Spencer Puryear, Joseph, obviously you, Abdullah, and Sinjeet. Thank you guys so much. Rob, also thank you for joining us as well.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, although I feel about 3 hours older. I don't know why.
It happens. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you like us talking specifically about Godzilla, we're going to have an entirely different Godzilla podcast you can listen to soon if you want to. Don't you think that might be a nice idea, Rob?
I think that's a great idea. Let's get into it.
All right, let's do it. But next time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joseph. Bye, everybody.